So there are a ton of different reptile thermostats available. I definitely don't have all of them, but I do have a handful here that we can use to kind of compare and see just how consistent they are. I have a couple digital and a handful of analog, so we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to do some different little tests in different environments to really just compare different levels of temperatures and humidities. According to this, the house is 77 degrees. I'm not sure how accurate that actually is, but we'll see in the comparison. We have a ZoomMed analog that measures the humidity and temperature. Not one, but two different Petco temperature gauges. Those are both analog. A PICS digital gauge that gauges both the temperature and humidity. A digital temperature gun. And finally, we have two Petco humidity gauges. So showers are clearly humid, so that's exactly what I did so that we could test the humidity. I put everything in the same room, and then about 15 minutes later, it's clearly really humid. So one of the digital ones actually went blank, and I believe that means that it went too high or above 90% or so. But we can go ahead and check the rest of the temps and humidities and compare them afterwards. So between the 5 different temperature gauges, there was only a 3-degree difference between them, so I think that's going to be really good and really won't make a big difference with your reptiles. Humidity, on the other hand, it was a 35 to 45% range. I'm not exactly sure what the PICS digital was trying to say, which is kind of annoying. But that is a massive range that's not going to be okay, because let's say one of the more extreme humidity levels was actually correct, and then you get one of the gauges that was way off or one of the lowest, that can cause some issues with your animal. I want to actually see just how high these levels could get, so I tried to make it as humid as possible by putting them in between some damp paper towels. I also kept the camera on for about 5 minutes to see when that digital thermostat actually goes blank, and it looks like it's right about when it passes 90%. You probably know the drill by now, so we can check all of the levels. So this go around I didn't actually do the temp gun, but there was a 7-degree range between them, even though they were in the same conditions, so that's slightly more concerning. It's still not too bad, but not as good as it could be either. Humidity wasn't as bad, but it was still pretty bad with approximately an 18 to 28% range, but you're going to notice that the first Petco analog gauge is actually quite off, and I believe that one's broken, which is going to be a problem if that's the only one that you have, because you're going to have no idea that it's broken if you're not going to compare it to anything else. Next up, we can do a heat test. I did this with a ceramic emitter, and that also kills humidity, so it'll be interesting just how much it'll affect both of those levels. I gave it about 10 or 15 minutes under the hot lamp, but we can go ahead and check the levels. Now right here, you're going to notice the temp gun is going to change a lot. In this first place that I'm pointing it, I'm actually pointing it at the surface that the other gauges are touching, and it's right about around 100 degrees. However, when I turn it just a little, you can see it's spiking up to almost 150 degrees, and all I did was point it at the actual analog gauge, but I'll explain why I think it did that in just a minute. So I believe what's happening is when I pointed the temp gun at the surface that was on, which it was right behind it, so say my hand was the surface, this was about 100 degrees or so. However, when I pointed it on the actual front of this, that's when it spiked up to 150 degrees. So I think what's happening is because this is open on the back and not the front, this is where it's actually gauging the temperature. So it's not gauging that direct temperature that's right on the front, and that can be a problem because it's making a massive difference. So what I did is I did it again, but I turned all these over so that the part that actually gauges and measures everything is face up, which is how it would not be in the enclosure. And just a quick reminder, don't let your animals anywhere near the actual surface of that bulb, because this was just a 100-degree ceramic bulb, and it was over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is a huge difference, just by turning these little gauges over so that it exposes the side that's actually measuring the temperature. It went up a solid 15 to 20 degrees, which is pretty concerning. Humidity, there was a 31% range. The first Petco analog is just definitely broken. However, even the other analogs vary quite a bit, especially from that digital one. And then the temperature, when they're all turned over, has a 13-degree range, which is pretty big and I'm also worried about. So now I guess we can talk about kind of a conclusion to all of this. But actually before that, there's one more thing I want to say about these. and that is that most of these thermostats, or the little gauges that are analog, they often have that sticky stuff on the back, and then this velcros to it. And this is actually pretty dangerous to some reptiles. I had this happen to mine. It wasn't a very serious case, but the adhesive that was on the enclosure actually just ended coming off. It just peeled off over time, and my blue-tongued skink went to investigate it, and she actually just kind of walked past it afterwards, and it got stuck to her. So that really strong adhesive was really stuck to her scales well, and it wasn't too easy to get off. Luckily she was fine, but reptiles have had their scales actually torn off by this adhesive. So this is another downside to these gauges, and just something to keep in mind. But other than that, the actual measuring of it, firstly, one of these is definitely broken. One of the Petco ones. I mean, we know how good Petco is in general, but it is concerning knowing that some of these individuals either have to be broken, and if they're not broken, then I guess that's worse, because I guess that means they're just really off, because there was quite a big range that could really make a difference with your reptile care. So all of the analogs I definitely just wouldn't use. I really don't use them anymore. I don't trust them. I guess they kind of work. For example, the temperature ones were actually really close. The two Petco temperature ones, they weren't too far off from the others, but they're still too unreliable to me, so I'm gonna try and stick to the digital ones. So this little digital one that did the humidity, it was usually just about the median. Other than the super high humidities when it would just blank out past 88%, which was pretty annoying, I feel like this is somewhat trustworthy when it comes to humidity. These do make me feel quite a bit better. They have pretty good reviews, and I've been using it for a while, and it appears to be working really well. And I love the temp guns. I've been using this for quite a while. So make sure you check these out in the description, because I'll make sure to link those so that you can actually buy them. And if you use those links, you can help support GoHerping, because although this isn't sponsored or anything, I do get a small commission from Amazon whenever someone uses those links, so it's a good way to help me out. But the analogs, they appear to be okay with measuring the temperatures, but the humidities were quite far off, at least the ones that I was using, and there is that risk with the adhesive. So I'm gonna try and avoid those from now on. Lots of people do still use them, so I'm sure they still work at some capacity, as we saw. But that's kind of just my personal conclusion from these little somewhat scientific tests that we did. But let me know your thoughts and opinions and experiences with different sorts of gauges and all sorts of things. But that'll be it for this video. I'm Alex, and thanks for watching.